So welcome, everybody. I just want a very quick overview of the FSHD Society. We have a focus on treatments, and we do this through educating, empowering patients and families and other stakeholders, including researchers and clinicians around the world. And we have a number of initiatives that are aimed at accelerating the development and delivery of effective treatments to everyone. And as I mentioned, no one needs to do this alone. Together, we are stronger. So I would like to first introduce Dr. John Vissing from Copenhagen, and his colleague Nikolai Preisler will be joining us later. But I wanted to start by giving them a chance to talk about the research, the clinical capabilities, the resources that are already there in the Nordic region, in Copenhagen in this case. So, Dr. Vissing, I will turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, June. Maybe I should share my screen, and again, I have a PowerPoint to show.
All right. Are you able to share your screen?
Right. Wait. Yeah. Maybe I can't. Oh, yes, I think I can. So can you see this?
Yes.
Right. So I can skip a bit of this. So we are here, you know, at the National Hospital in these white buildings, which were built just a few years ago. I think if we look at the Nordic countries, it's actually organized quite differently. So Denmark is extremely centralized when it comes to neuromuscular diseases, whereas in Finland, Norway, and Sweden, it's more because of the geography, because the countries are much bigger. It is much more spread out. So obviously you have a sort of a concentration in Stockholm and Gothenburg in Sweden, and you have in Oslo in Norway, but a lot of patients with FSHD are actually seen at other hospitals as well. And that's very different in Denmark. There are only 3 hospitals which are allowed to see. It's actually not allowed to be followed at other hospitals than the 3 highly specialized neuromuscular clinics. So from that perspective, it is quite different. I really don't know about, how the patient organizations are operating in the other Nordic countries. In Denmark, we have the Muscular Dystrophy Association, or Muskelsvindfonden, and they are a big umbrella for all muscular dystrophy patients, but there is a special subgroup of FSHD patients, and they meet every now and then. I remember I had a meeting with them last spring and told them about what was ongoing and so on. So that there is sort of a format for FSHD patients in Denmark, at least. I don't know whether that's the case in the other countries. So FSHD, you all know the characteristics here is that it can be very asymmetric. You can see here on this scan how differently this really is unique for this condition compared to so many other muscle diseases which are quite symmetric. You can see it again here in this gentleman, how different the thigh on this side is from this thigh over here. So this is quite a peculiar thing. Another thing which I think has been overlooked in FSHD is the paraspinal muscle, as we see it here. It's a quite complex muscle. It's actually overlooked in many muscle diseases, but we have shown that in FSHD, this muscle can actually be quite affected. Here you see a cross-section of the back. So here is the contour. Can you see my cursor when I move
yes.
it? Oh, you can.
Yep.
So you see the muscle here is completely white compared to the healthy person over here. So it's quite heavily involved in FSHD, actually as much as some of the more severe muscles we see. And you can see that actually, you know, the amount of fat in the paraspinal muscles in the back here correlates quite well with the disease score and with the strength in the back muscles. So looking at MRI findings, looking at the fat level in the with the MRI actually is a good biomarker of function as well. We can skip these other studies and move on to yeah, maybe we can look at this for a while. So this picture here shows you the muscle up here. If you look where my cursor is, you can see that there is some involvement in the thigh, in the anterior thigh muscle here. And here in white down here, this is a special sequence showing water in the muscle. Here there's increased amount of water signifying there's inflammation in the muscle. And after 1 year, which is here on the right side, you see that this water has disappeared. It's not bright anymore. But if you look at the muscle here, it has been replaced by fat. Here, it's muscle on baseline here to the left. And after 1 year, it has been replaced by fat. And so one idea here is that inflammation in FSHD plays a big role for the disease mechanism. And we have looked at this by sequentially scanning persons with FSHD every second month for the first year, and then with a little bit more spacing afterwards. And what we see here, this is a rather complicated slide, but really the simple thing is, this is the water level, the green graph here. And as it increases in some muscles, the progression of the fat involvement, as you can see here, also increases. So it looks as if there is a relationship between muscle inflammation and degeneration of the muscle. Whether that inflammation is really playing a big role or it's just a phenomenon that we see on top of this, we don't really know. Training is also good. We have done quite a number of interventions. This is an old study from 2005. I think actually the first really training study of FSHD patients. And you can see that this is the fitness level before training here to the left in black, and after training here in gray. And you can see that the fitness level significantly increases, actually just as well as it does in healthy persons. And there's been a number of training studies showing that this is actually a consistent finding. So training is good. It does not really damage your muscle. And in fact, you can actually do high intensity training. So cycles of very brief 1 minute cycles where you go at light, the green, the light exercise, moderate exercise here, which is the orange or yellow, and then 10 seconds at a high intensity, and you repeat that 5 times. And then you rest, and then you repeat it again. You can do this 3 times a week, and it actually works as well as training for a much longer time. So by training all together something that looks like 30 minutes every week at high intensity will give you the same cardiovascular and fitness benefits as a longer duration exercise at a lower level. And it's quite safe in FSHD. So getting into some of the pharmaceutical trials that are on the way or ongoing. So this is a complicated slide. Maybe some of you have seen it. It deals with, you know, what the genetic defect is in FSHD. And the trouble for most patients is that there is a contraction of a repeat array. So what we call the default set 4 repeat array. And when that is contracted, it allows for the expression of what is called DOX4. This is a protein which is usually not expressed after birth. It's a protein you use when you are a fetus. It's used for growth, but it will damage your muscle if it's turned on for the rest of your life. And this DOX4 is expressed when you have FSHD, and this is actually the core of the disease mechanism. Another way you can get an expression of DOX4 is if you have FSHD type 2, which is a much rarer condition. Here, this protein is defective and also then allows DOX4 expression. So no matter whether you have one or the other types of FSHD, the actual molecular problem is the same, namely expression of DOX4. So one company has tried to attack this head on by giving a drug that suppresses DOX4 expression. Losmapimod is a drug that has been studied by or it hasn't actually been developed by the company. It was a drug that was there before, so it's been repurposed for this treatment. The company is Fulcrum. It's an American biotech company. They have run a phase 1 study and a phase 2 study. So, you know, studies of not very many patients. In the phase 2 study, they showed some efficacy of this drug. So that was quite promising. Here in blue, you can see that they still have this study ongoing. Now it is not in a blinded control phase. Now it's an open phase where everybody gets the active drug. But because of these promising results, the company has now started a phase 3 study, which is a much larger scale study with 240 patients, and it's a worldwide study, so it's running at many sites, and our site has just been initiated. We haven't included any patients yet, but we will in the coming weeks. We will see our first patients. I know there are a few sites in the US and maybe 2 or 3 other sites in Europe that are open, but I think in total there will be, I don't know exactly how many sites there are, but I think more than 20. The primary thing which will be looked at is what is called the reachable workspace. So it is basically assessing, you know, your movement with your arms. I have a slide to show you this. It's a study that will run for 1.5 years where you either, and we can see this this is actually the reachable workspace. So you sit there with sensors on, and a computer will actually exactly show how much you can move your arms around. In the phase 2 study, they saw improvements in the mobility of your arms, which is, you know, one of the key areas where you are affected if you have this disorder. So the study design here is that you either are on active treatment or on a placebo treatment for this 1.5 year. I know they are planning an open label extension of this so that you will get the active drug. After this, everybody will get the active drug after the end of this 1.5 year. And besides looking at the reachable workspace, they also assess the quality of life, and they also do muscle MRI. As I just showed you, this is a very strong biomarker. It probably shows change in muscle parameters earlier than you can see muscle improvements in muscle function, and that's why it's a very nice instrument to use as well. So the last, I don't really have an interesting slide to show on this trial because I really don't have any material on it, but it is actually active now. It's only a phase 2 study, so it's not very big. I forget exactly how many patients are in the study. I think it's only like 60 patients or something like this. It's different from the other trial because it's not attacking DOX4. It's actually a more general treatment where you're trying to boost muscle regeneration. And the way you do this is by giving patients an antibody against myostatin. And myostatin is a protein that inhibits muscle growth in man. So by inhibiting something that inhibits muscle growth, you actually facilitate muscle regeneration. And it makes sense in this condition. It has proven, not to work in a number of other conditions, but in those conditions, they hardly had any myostatin. So that was not something to block, but in FSHD, myostatin levels are fairly normal, and therefore you would think that there is something you can block, and probably it could be a pathway for increased muscle regeneration. In other words, in this study, you don't really attack the key mechanism of the disease, but you are preventing or you're increasing the muscle regeneration in the patients, which could also be quite beneficial. And we have started just now including patients in this trial. Obviously, it's a smaller trial and it's not run in that many centers. I think maybe like 10 centers are involved in this trial. And we have just started here, so I think we have only screened 3 patients or so, and maybe one has been randomized to treatment. So we just started. Yeah, that's about it. I know that other companies are working also on the previous study, similar drug developments as Fulcrum, which was the study I just showed you before, namely inhibiting DOX4 expression. They haven't quite come to clinical trials yet, but I think some of them will in the course of this year. So I think it's an exciting time for FSHD because of all these trials that are ongoing and will come in the very near future. I think that's about it.
Great, thank you so much. Are there any questions for Dr. Wissing? I see some in the chat. One person is asking if patients from Sweden can participate in a study in Denmark, and someone from Norway asked the same question. So Are you able to take international, patients from other countries?
We are able to take patients from other countries, and this is indeed also something we do in other trials in limb-girdle muscular dystrophy, where we currently have 25 patients, I think, that we fly in and out. So that is a possibility.
How would one what is the process for enrolling?
Well, we haven't really posted this because we have quite a number of patients locally here. And of course, at least in the first months of the trial here, we will offer this to our patients in the clinic.
Okay.
But it could very well be that we could offer this a little later on in the spring.
And how would you communicate that to, if that happens?
Oh, we haven't made any plans. We want to start off first and see how things go, and how obviously, for us it's easier to recruit patients who live very close to us. It's also much easier for them with the transport and so on.
Mm-hmm.
So we have not made any particular plans. So for the other studies that I just told you about, where we do see international patients, this has typically been posted on registries, or where they send out newsletters, and they give our contact details there. So that would be one way of doing it. For this particular, I don't think there are any registries for FSHD in the Nordic countries, to my sense, to my knowledge. But one way we could post this was to send it to the patient organizations and have them send out sort of a newsletter, or in the news magazine, they can have a small article about it. That would be one way of doing it.
Okay. Well, we would certainly be happy to help with that, since we do have a number of people from the Nordic countries, as you see from the attendance today on in our patient database. We have a global patient database.
We want to hold on, or hold back a little bit,
sure,
because we don't want to disappoint a lot of people.
Of course.
And I can tell you, we're doing a gene therapy trial now where we include 6 patients in a year. And we probably only do 3 of them. And we have about 200 patients that are lined up for this, who have, approached us, and we can only offer it to 3.
Right.
To begin with, at least. So in order not to disappoint a lot of people, we are keeping sort of a little bit of a low profile to begin with this trial, until we see, how things are running. Right.
No, we certainly understand that. Hey, if anyone has questions, you can speak up, or you can use the raise your hand function, which is, if you know where that is, on the bottom of the Zoom screen, where it says reactions, you can raise your hand. And is Dr. Preisler, has he logged in?
Nikolai, are you here?
Not yet, okay. I see a question from Philip.
Yes, hello. I have actually some questions regarding the presentation you did. It's regarding, do we know the relationship between the DUX4 and the muscle inflammation? Like, is the DUX4 the root cause of the inflammation?
It's believed to be so the expression of DUX4, the inappropriate expression, because it should have been shut down, is thought to be the cause of the disease. It's really difficult to measure DUX4 expression, because it goes up and down. and its relationship to inflammation, this is not known. So in the Fulcrum trial, in the phase 2 study, the one that came before the one which is ongoing now, the primary endpoint of the trial was to show that DOX4 was repressed by the treatment, and it failed. They took muscle biopsies in that study to see whether DOX4 actually was suppressed, and they couldn't show it. So it's really difficult because it's an expression pattern that goes up and down all the time, and it's different from muscle to muscle. But everybody in the field here believes that this is still the cause of the disease, that you express DOX4 again.
I wanted to, and thank you so much. I wanted to quickly introduce Jamshid Arjamand, who is our Chief Science Officer. I didn't warn him that I was going to expose him, but I just wanted everyone to have a chance to meet him. And also, Jamshid, if you have any additional comments to make about inflammation and...
I thank you very much, June, for inviting me to this. Thank you. It's wonderful to see everyone. No, this is a very exciting time, actually. It's not only is the losmapimod trial ongoing right now, but there are a couple of other trials that are gearing up in the near future. So there's going to be multiple opportunities for people to participate. And as we learn every one of these trials, actually, there are some important lessons that are learned, and that other companies that come down the line can learn from. So one of the major lessons, I think, from the study, I think, John, you were mentioning the Acceleron trial. Was that, did you mention that at all, or?
Oh, I didn't.
Okay.
So, but I can, I wasn't, we weren't part of the Acceleron trial, but obviously it was an anti-myostatin trial as well, you know, but it
Exactly.
it was an injection into the muscle locally, so so it's quite different from the one that Roche is performing now, and that we have just started. This is a systemic delivery, so you get the anti-myostatin intravenously, so it will reach potentially all muscles in the body.
But I think, thank you very much for clarifying this. One of the, I think, the major lessons from the Acceleron trial was that they ran their trial for 6 months. And even though they were seeing an increase in the muscle growth, they did not see a correlation, an improvement in function. And but had they gone longer, maybe to a year long, they may have seen that improvement. And I think that was one of the lessons that was learned, and all the subsequent trials now are doing a minimum of a 1-year trial, it looks like, and very important lessons. So even though the drug may not have gone forward and it's been shelved right now, there are lessons that are always learned and adapted, and I think this is what we're going to see more and more of these trials and better clinical trial designs. So it's a very hopeful time. I'm very excited by this.
Yeah, I agree.
There's a question about Avidity Bioscience. Is that trial? Is there a discussion with you, Dr. Vissing, about?
No, I mean, I have talked to them, but we are not part of the trial. I think they are using an RNA based technique. It looks exciting, I think, what they're doing. I don't know exactly how far they are with that clinical development. Maybe somebody else knows on the call here.
They have a trial, ongoing trial now, using the same platform in myotonic dystrophy and Duchenne's. And I think those are moving. They're working very well, I think. So I think they got fast track designation, I think, for, was it for myotonic? I forget what they
well,
got.
they just
I think it was for myotonic, yes.
Yeah.
They just got it also for their FSHD
Oh,
drug.
Okay.
And they are planning to launch what they call a phase 1/2 trial fairly soon. We're supposed to host a webinar with them in February. And if they are on their timeline, if they will have announced their trial sites by then. And if they haven't, we'll delay a little bit longer. We've learned these things take a really long time to set up all these sites. There's a tremendous amount of regulations and things that have to be met. So that will be an interesting one to watch. And I think one of the points here is phase 2 trials maybe need around 30 to 50, 60 patients on a larger one. But if they're successful and move to phase 3, now you're talking 200-300 patients. And we're looking at in a few years, maybe there will be 2, 3, 4 such trials going on at the same time. And that's very challenging in a rare disease, to be able to recruit those numbers of patients when people are spread far apart and so on. So at the Society, we are looking at that. What are those challenges? What can we do now to make sure that when the time comes, the trials all have a chance to be completed successfully? The worst thing that can happen in drug development is if you cannot recruit enough patients in the limited amount of time a company has, and they close the trial down, and you never get to find out if the drug is going to work at all. So we are very focused right now on building the community that can support the trials that we see coming. I see that Dr. Preisler has joined us. Can you unmute and if you had a few. Hello.
Hello. Yeah. Yes, I just tapped in. I'm Nikolai Preisler. Yeah, working with John in Copenhagen. So, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Let me see if if you also can see me. Yeah, but yeah, do you have any questions or anything, or did John already mention what is going on in Copenhagen?
He mentioned the studies that are going on, and also I do want to, recognize very important role that Dr. Vissing and his colleagues have played in our understanding of exercise. That's had a worldwide impact for patients to know that different types of exercise, high intensity exercise, are safe. So do you need to pay some attention to your child?
So Nikolai, maybe you should mute your phone with all the kids you have around you.
No.
You can join us again in a little bit when everyone has gotten over the excitement of Pop and Daddy coming home.
Yeah.
There's a question here about enrolling children. Why are children not currently enrolled in trials when they may have the potential?
There's a general rule for these things. So, unless you have an extremely severe disease, which can even be fatal, and we see this for spinal muscular atrophy patients and some other congenital really serious disorders. Of course, there you do treat children. We also in a muscular dystrophy like Duchenne muscular dystrophy, which obviously is also a very severe condition, and we know that we need to start very early to get a response. Then you do experiments in children, but otherwise, for all other conditions, you always start with the adults to spare the children. And for FSHD, although it can be disabling, it's a much milder muscular dystrophy, so there would be no chance never ever, to start a trial first in children with FSHD. That doesn't mean that if we find a drug which is really working, that this won't also be applied to children. I'm sure it will. And I'm actually sure that the sooner you treat, the better. So it will actually be very good to treat children. But it's just regulatory matters that determines this. It is not possible to start a trial in children with FSHD as it is now.
And also, because children are not just small adults, you'd have to do toxicology and, a lot of preliminary studies, which exposes children to the risk. It takes a longer time. And if your end goal is to get treatments to patients, to children fastest, probably having as short an effective adult trial is probably the best way to get the treatment to children. Would you agree that that's?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm curious about the people's access to good care, or doctors who know a lot about FSHD. And I was wondering, in our audience today, have you had difficulty finding the medical care that you need or that your family needs? If you have difficulty, raise your hand. Or you could use your virtual hand too, if you like. So I'm not seeing too many people, I saw one or two who are on camera. So I hope that's good news that people are able to find doctors who understand FSHD. But I know that in many places, many people have a difficult time finding the doctors or physical therapists and so on. But Dr. Vissing or Dr. Preisler, if you can talk about what are the clinical care services that patients can expect or receive if they come to your center. So what?
Well, I mean, obviously, so far we haven't had any effective therapy. We have done a number of exploratory trials, some of them, not involving treatment, but others involving different kinds of rehabilitation, physical training of different sorts, which have been successful. But besides that, I mean, it's all supportive therapy that the patients can expect, and it goes with the same with the other two centers that we have here in Denmark.
Okay.
So patients are basically not seen outside these centers. They're not seen by non-neuromuscular centers.
That's in Denmark. That's very interesting. And in the other countries, it might not be the case. It's that centralized, right? You said that before.
I know that in Norway and Sweden, because the geography is, it's huge countries and much less densely populated than here. So it's easy for us to move around in a small country. But there, sometimes you have a department of neurology where you don't necessarily have a neuromuscular specialist, but where they do see these patients.
Right. So, if you may, I'm going to share my screen again because I wanted to talk a bit about, oops, sorry, there we go. About the bigger picture. I wanted people to understand what is going on globally, and also what the society is doing to help activate and support patient advocacy organizations around the world. So what you see here, I alluded to before, we have a lot of therapies now being developed and reaching clinical trial phase. So across the top, what you see is you have the research, basic research stage. Then you have studies. This is very US centric, I'm afraid, but IND is a term used by the FDA, investigational new drug. So these are studies that prepare a company to present data to the FDA to say, we feel this drug is safe, it's an appropriate for use in human patients, we think it will be effective, we would like permission to start using it in a clinical trial, basically. And if FDA agrees with that, then it goes into trial, and there's a phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and so on. So what we have right now is we have, of course, Fulcrum in a phase 3 trial. We have some companies that are still anonymous that are working on IND enabling studies. The top group, the brown, are small molecules like losmapimod that you can take as a pill, and they block the DUX4 mechanism in some way. Then we have biologics that are also targeting DUX4, like Avidity Biosciences, mRNA-based therapies. Dyne Therapeutics right now has a myotonic dystrophy drug in clinical trials, and they have already announced their intention to start an FSHD trial in about a year from now, and so on. So there's a lot of companies down in the biologics area. You can see Epic Bio, which is a company using sort of a CRISPR-based gene editing type technology to address DUX4. Miracule below that is another similar to Avidity and Dyne with an mRNA-based therapy, but they have just partnered with Sanofi, which is one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world. So they have significant resources to take that through IND studies and hopefully into clinical trials. So there are a lot of things coming along. We also have under here Roche, the drug which is now in phase 2 trial. Vita Therapeutics, that's an interesting one that's based on induced pluripotent stem cells that will be in effect treated in a test tube and then transplanted into patients. So this is why we have to think ahead. What does this mean for the landscape of, trial treatment development? What does it mean for patients? So this is a kind of a diagram where we're showing how many different parts have to lock and work together in order to get treatments. And so what you see are, you need patients and families, you needed trial sites, you need data and evidence, you need a company willing with a drug and that's willing to conduct a trial, bring a drug to a particular market. And great news is in Nordic countries, you have a lot of infrastructure, you have a lot of assets. You have sites like in Copenhagen that are able already doing clinical trials. The question I have is there capability and interest in other countries? I don't know the answer to that. And maybe in this group, people have some ideas about that, but that is one question I have. Clearly, there are companies already with an interest in conducting trials, and more companies are in the wings and will be interested if they see that there is the adequate infrastructure for trials and the patient community that can respond to, trial, to a call for recruitment to trial. And you have a lot of data. We had a question come up. Dr. Vissing was wondering, what is the status of FSHD registries across Nordic countries? I also am wondering how many patients have genetic confirmation as opposed to just a doctor's clinical evaluation saying, you have all the symptoms and you are FSHD. But many of these trials that target DUX4 will require that you have the genetic test. So again, I personally don't know what the access availability of testing is and how many patients have had genetic testing. You all have a great advantage over the United States in having nationalized health systems where presumably the data is a little more available to be analyzed to determine, the prevalence of FSHD, the socioeconomic impact of FSHD, et cetera. So a question that I have for all of you is, do you know what your government requires in order to approve a treatment for patients, or to approve access? So let's say losmapimod is approved. We don't know. It will, cross our fingers, it will be approved in a few years in the United States. If that happens, how does it get to patients in your country? Because it's not an automatic procedure. You have regulatory bodies, you have national health systems that pay for treatment. Do you know what is required for treatments to be approved for patients in your country to access them? And this is a good time to understand that and think about, is there anything that needs to be done to make sure that there are no barriers to access? And finally, I put at the very beginning of this machinery, the patient groups. An active, organized patient group plays an enormous role, especially in a rare disease. Who speaks for you? Ultimately, you have to speak up for yourself about what you need and to advocate for coverage, for treatment, for new treatments. In our view, it's those active patient groups that put everything else, into motion. And I will expand, not just patients, clinicians, people like Dr. Vissing, who decided, to dedicate a lot of their energy in the professional life to FSHD. You all together you're the ones who make things happen. So we have a number of key international projects that offer opportunities, and we are looking for, participation from as many countries as possible. First, health economic outcome studies play a very important role in government policy decisions about the pricing, fair pricing for drugs, access to drugs. It differs from one country to the other. So this is something that the advocacy groups in your own countries need to take on to conduct these types of studies or work with academics who do these types of studies. We are currently working on a new international standard of care with a group of expert authors covering 14 different topics in the care of patients with FSHD. We're working with the European Reference Network and TreatNMD, and we hope to have a publication in a major journal. This is a little optimistic. I think we're going to submit by the end of 2023. As part of that, we are reaching out to medical associations in all countries to review the manuscript when it's ready, to endorse this standard of care. So this is one of the ways by which we get doctors to change practice to, if there's a new best standard for genetic testing, for example, or for recommending this or that, it goes through this process. It has to be published in a medical journal. It's evidence-based, and then the associations can play a role in endorsing it and making sure their members are following the standard. And in the meantime, we also have professional medical education. So what we considered a very up-to-date current standard of care is available through an online course with a faculty of recognized experts around the world. It's very inexpensive. It is, doctors can get accreditation. These are professional credits that many places require doctors to earn on a, every few years. They need to get so many credits to maintain their license to practice. So, so it's a nice incentive for them to take the course. And it's in the English language, but, does it need to be translated or have subtitles? Is there a way you can help to promote it to doctors in your countries? We're looking for if you're interested in helping and collaborating with that, that's another very immediate action one can take. And as I said, we are anticipating a need for more and more trial-capable sites. Currently, there's the Clinical Trial Research Network, which started with in 2016 with 4 sites in the United States. It has grown. FSHD funding, National Institutes of Health funding, MDA funding, and funding from other sources. So there are now 12 sites in the United States, 6 in EU and UK, 3 sites in Canada. They are running the MOVE and MOVE Plus natural history studies, Fulcrum phase 3 trial, Avidity study that Roche studies are running on at some of these sites. And it's a really very powerful international network with agreements on data sharing, on all the clinicians, the physical therapists at each site are trained to carry out the assessments in a standardized way. And the existence of the network, I think, has really catalyzed pharmaceutical company interest in FSHD, because they see that there is an infrastructure to do these very high quality trials. And I just wanted to mention in the UK, a group of patients came to us. They were upset that there were no UK sites in the Fulcrum phase 2 trial or any of the other trials. And they said, what can we do? And I said, well, you need to band together. You need to figure out what it is that it will take to be considered a trial site. Joining the network is a good way to get on the map. And there was a patient there who just got all of these stakeholders together about 1.5 years ago, started these conversations, reached out to the Clinical Trial Research Network, reached out to companies. Well, in the space of 1.5 years, they have gone from having 0 sites to potentially 5 sites in the United Kingdom. So I believe that there's a similar type of potential in the Nordic countries. You have different challenges because you have different countries, different systems, but still you have very good researchers and research infrastructure and communications. So I feel like it's something that can be done. You can, what I just want to say is you have a jump start. You don't have to start from nothing, because the FSHD Society was founded 30 years ago, did all of this basic work, gathering patients, advocating for research fundraising. And then as we professionalized, and when in 2010 the genetic mechanism was discovered, that just suddenly a big acceleration, more funding coming into the field. So many patient groups now from around the world are entering the stage, at this late stage, where you can take advantage of everything that has come before you and really speed up the development of drugs, of clinical trials and access to treatments. So we want you to be able to, we want you to know you have a springboard. You really can get a good start in advocating for more sites and all those good things in your countries. And you will not be alone. We have formed a World FSHD Alliance. You can see we have over nearly 20 countries. We meet quarterly, and then we have an annual leadership summit where we work together to have an aligned vision. Countries work with each other to develop goals that are specific and appropriate to the conditions in each country. And we all share what we're learning. We share our resources. We meet every quarter over Zoom, and we have an annual leadership summit. The next one is in Milan in Italy. And it would be really cool if there was some representation from the Nordic countries there. And I should mention, actually, this coming Saturday, January 28th, we're having a quarterly Zoom meeting. So if anyone is interested in attending and observing, you are welcome to do so. You can just contact me and let me know. So just to sum up, you have excellent assets. You have access to good clinicians, genetic diagnosis, you have research infrastructure, you have companies that are interested. I think what you need in order to make a difference is strong leadership in the FSHD community to kind of tie all these pieces together and have a plan, communicate and develop a strategy. You define what your goals are. That's really important, obviously, and then have a strategy. So that's just my little spiel. I just wanted to give you that message and see if you have any questions, comments.
Maybe I can just come with a comment. I have to leave now, unfortunately. I have a meeting here at 6,
Yeah.
but I think, the challenge, June, is because I think, the patients are there, they're willing, and obviously the healthcare systems in all of Scandinavia is very good, but it's organized differently, and for rare diseases, in order for this to move on, you really need a passionate person, who's really dedicated to move this along. So you would need a doctor that starts this, or a patient, someone who keeps driving this. Right now, to my knowledge, there are no really in adult neurology or neuromuscular field, no really clinical trials going on in the other Scandinavian countries. And it's difficult to start, from scratch when you only have one nurse, and it's very sensitive to small. You need a critical volume of staff to run clinical trials. And now we run 30 clinical trials, and we have 6 or 7 dedicated nurses and so on. Then it's easier, much easier to run it, and but it's really difficult to start. Yeah. So we need to get over this hump, I think, in the different places. It's not easy.
I agree. It's not easy, but I think it takes leadership. It takes someone, either a clinician like yourself, very dedicated, but I've seen patients, strong patient leaders, often someone with experience, from business. They've done project management, they've done team, they've worked with teams, and they come in and say, we need to change things here. We need to get everybody together. We have a lot of willing soldiers. We just don't have a general, that's sort of and that can make a difference. And I think, there is, you're, economically, I mean, there could be fundraising to get a trial site going to pay for some of the essential staff. And then you have companies coming, then the big dollars come in when the companies want to do a trial there, right? So I think the potential is there. I think what the critical piece that is missing is the leadership and the society. We're not based there. We don't know the system. We also don't have the bandwidth. We're a small organization, but we can provide a lot of support. We can provide marketing and communication support. We can provide networking to the trial, to Dr. Statlin and the trial networks. We can network you to the companies. We can coach, we can provide tools, but we do need somebody.
I really have to go now to this other meeting. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much for your time.
Bye.
Bye. So anyway, that is my call to action. It's really up to all of you in terms of what you would like to see happen there. I'm just sharing what the global situation looks like, what the opportunity is, how we can support you. But it is up to all of you here today to think about, do you want something more to happen in your country? And do you feel you can be part of that effort? Are there any questions or comments? I don't want to put anyone on the spot. I just wanted to give you things to think about, and maybe we follow up. All right, well.
Oh yeah, it's Nikolai. Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on. I don't know if there's too many kids in the background, but I just wanted to follow up. So I mean, if there's anybody planning to start a clinical site, we're there to help. You know, so feel free to reach out to me or John, and we'll give you know, help with advice if that's what you need, and maybe how to get started. You know, practically wise. So at least that's what we can provide and help with. No,
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks. All right. Well, I don't know if I see any questions, but you can, I think you all have my email, but I'll put it in the chat. And as I said, we have our quarterly meeting of the World FSHD Alliance this Saturday. It's at 8 a.m. US time, so I think that's maybe 2 in the afternoon or 2 or 3 in the afternoon for you. You're welcome. If you're interested, let me know, and I can send you a Zoom link so you can just observe and see what people are talking about, what this is like. Feel free to reach out to me with questions. I can also connect you with some of these very dynamic patient leaders in other countries if you want to find out more about what they did, the time commitment, you know, whatever questions you might have. But I hope I've intrigued you. This is a really important time. This is an exciting time, and it's a time where, you know, just a few people can really have an impact, can really change the world. So just that's my message for today. Thank you all for coming.